What's up? So, I want to try to post more frequently. I'm going to try to be more adamant about reading the news and kind of giving my thoughts on things a couple times a week, hopefully. It'd be nice if I could do it at least once, if I could do it once a day, but we'll see. But I did find a few things in the headlines that were interesting to me. First and foremost, I see here May 31st, the headline reads, Kansas Constitution does not include a right to vote, state Supreme Court majority says. So there you have it, statists and social contract people and the state's own Supreme Court. Much like with the perpetual rulings that police don't have an obligation to protect people, Justice Caleb Stegall, or Stegall, Stegall, writing for the majority, said that the dissenting justices wrongly accused the majority of ignoring past precedent, holding that the court has not identified a, quote, fundamental right to vote within the state constitution. It simply is not there, they wrote. Another judge, Eric Rosen, one of the three of the seven who dissented, he said, It staggers my imagination to conclude that Kansas citizens have no fundamental right to vote under their state constitution. Well, it's interesting, of course, only a statist could be confused by that. I mean, obviously, most people would probably assume this, but, if it's not written down explicitly, of course, logically, whether they realize this or not, the vote is not fundamental. The concept of the state itself is that, it's the agency that you didn't vote for. The state does not need your consent. Authority, conceptually, by definition, by implication, does not need your consent. If they needed your consent, then it would be to say that they are not authority, right? Because they need your permission. They don't have the right to rule. If they had the right to rule, if they were authority in such and such matter, then they wouldn't need your permission. Like if you used to say, I am authority over my car, you don't need other people's permission to stop them from using it, and other people in fact need your permission to use it. And you can't really get rid of that authority unless you sell the car, and then you kind of, you transfer that title. Anyway, the logic behind a state itself renders the concept of voting meaningless anyway, because in the end, if you lose the vote, you are coerced to comply anyway. So, in the end, it's all just a group of people coercing you, forcing themselves on you against your consent, by definition, against your consent. So this concept of a right to vote, it really doesn't make any sense. The same thing, and that's the same, and that would be and is the proper logic of why they say that the police are not obligated to protect people, because, imagine if they said that they were, then anytime they failed, you'd basically be entitled to restitution. Now, sometimes people can get some sort of settlement from the state, but not in this general sense. Like if your car gets stolen and the state's claiming that they have an obligation to ensure your defense and protection and of yourself and your property, then that would be a failure of them to live up to their end of the contract. But of course, the state is not a contract, so not only is it not written apparently in their constitution, but even if it were, it wouldn't make any difference. Maybe whoever, when they wrote this, they understood that, we don't need these people's consent. We don't necessarily think they have the right to vote, because, they changed throughout history. They recognize probably that they change who's allowed to vote. So, maybe even by that logic, if you can accept that the state can set criteria and change who is allowed to vote, then you would have to say that you do not have a right to vote. But anyway, I just thought that was an interesting ruling that kind of once again shows that the state is not what people claim it is, especially not them, unless it really comes down to brass tacks and they have no choice but to admit it and things like this. So that was from ABC News. I'll post all these in the description. Okay, so there's another one. It says, this kind of has to do with, or the reason it kind of drew my attention has to do with how people claim that without the state things would be so horrible, and they act like the state is generally pretty efficient with what they do, and like this is the best way to do these things. And this just kind of shows that it's not only is it not infallible, which the more indoctrinated statists kind of imply when they speak, but it can't even provide these basic services it claims that it is supposed to. Here in Oregon, for example, federal appeals court has upheld a ruling that Oregon defendants must be released from jail after 7 days if they don't have an appointed defense attorney. So what's going on here is that the state does not have enough attorneys to provide defense to how many here? Let's see, 3,200 defendants did not have a public defender as of Friday, and this article is from May 31st as well. So today is 6/1, June 1st, so yeah, just yesterday. Of course, this is a decent ruling, I would have to say. Of course, you'd have to say, well, based on this logic and this framework that they have claimed that they're creating here, if you bring me in for a crime and I can't afford an attorney, or cleverly, I suppose, don't get an attorney, then how long are you going to hold me in here until you guys can provide me one of the most basic services that you claim you're here to provide? So I thought that was pretty interesting too. Definitely an indictment of the alleged efficiency of the state. Another thing I thought was just kind of funny was this headline from CBS that says Trump may face travel restrictions in some countries after his New York conviction. Basically, the rundown is, some other countries, they don't let convicted felons come in. So the irony here is, of course, that Trump demanded much stricter migration regulation than he actually imposed, but he demanded quite strict migration regulation and imposed, and just generally kind of runs on this whole economic nationalist platform. Very simplistic one, to be honest, but generally that's kind of the spirit of the thing, right? We as libertarians know this. They probably know it too, but they think it's a good thing, whereas we understand the bunk economics behind it. Another brief mention here comes from Fox, where it says that the Soros heir urges Democrats to hammer Trump as a, quote, convicted felon at every opportunity. And the main reason I just want to bring this up is because that label in and of itself is not sufficient. It's not descriptive enough, because, right, the state, in their context of their legal theory, if you want to call it that, right? The state defines what a felon is, and of course the state defines a lot of things as felonies that don't actually hurt anyone. So it's too vague. Now, I would just advise be more specific than just calling someone a convicted felon, because a lot of people who have that title by the state are not bad people. Yeah, just a little distinction there, maybe a little pedantic, but nonetheless, consistency is key. And so I think I'll end it there. Just a couple thoughts I had browsing through the headlines from yesterday. I was doing this yesterday, but I haven't gotten to record this until the evening of the 1st. So one thing I'm probably not going to talk too much about if I do stay active on this is the trial. I did not mention that here because I have not been following it, because I really don't care. I already know that the courts are corrupt and the state's corrupt, so I don't really see any point in wasting my time and bandwidth on paying attention to that stuff. Maybe more the after effects, but haven't been paying enough attention to it, so probably won't talk about it. But all right, thanks for listening.